This happened to me and my two friends. 3 years ago, we were driving from Texas to California, and along the way we made quite a few stops. Not only to get gas, but to eat, and a few times we were so tired we had to stop at a motel to sleep. We tried to save money a couple times and slept in the car at a rest stop. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that sleeping at a rest stop is not the greatest idea, especially since we didn't have a plan or a designated stop in mind. We were too tired to drive in the middle of the night. Driving through Arizona, the rest stop was completely empty. There was nobody there for the majority of our trip. I drove, and on the occasion I'm speaking about, I was sitting in the driver's seat with both of my friends laying in the back of the truck in sleeping bags. I couldn't sleep, so I got out of the truck like 3 times to walk over to the vending machine by the bathrooms. I did, however, fall asleep at about 4 a.m. I didn't sleep for long. The Mountain Dew I drank went right through me, and I had to go pee. But before I opened the door to get out, something caught my eye. Standing on the other side of the empty parking lot was a person. I squinted my eyes to see them more clearly, but could only see that it was a man. I was pretty sure, at least. He was standing with his back facing the highway and forward facing me. I actually did not believe what I was seeing because of how scary it was. This is the kind of thing that you see in scary movies, I remember thinking to myself as I looked at this person. It didn't take me long to accept that it was real, and I sort of whisper yelled to my friends in the back. One of my friends made a grunting noise and the other ignored me. I opened the back window of my truck and whispered louder, telling them to get the hell up. Both of them moved, but didn't sit up. I turned to look at the person once more, and was startled to see that the person had moved closer to my truck. He was now standing in the middle of the parking lot. I could now see him much more clearly. He was wearing all black and black gloves. The man started pointing to the field behind my truck, in a way like he wanted me to look away from him. I turned over my shoulder again, and yelled at my friends to wake up. They both sat up. Now, concerned because I had told them to look at something, they looked around and asked, "What is it?" I turned to face the person again, and he was gone. I looked in the direction of the bathrooms behind me, over in the field, and he was just gone. My friends jumped in the truck after they saw how freaked out I was. I started the car and waited for a few seconds. To my absolute horror, I saw this person emerge out of the forestry from my driver's side window, running towards the car. I got so scared that I completely froze in place for a second, just staring at him running towards the car. I remember feeling this pouring sense of dread. Then, as my friends are basically screaming in my ear, I snap back. As the man is about reaching distance from the car, I pressed down on the gas as hard as I could. I flew out of there. Seeing him in the rearview mirror as I drove away, just looking at the car, made my stomach turn. Thinking back at the image of him running full speed towards my driver's side door, it makes me want to throw up every time. I went on a cross-country RV trip this past spring with my friend Melissa. She brought her 7 kids and 2 young German shepherds. The trip started in West Virginia, in a 20-year-old RV we called Big Betsy. And almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Among other things, the water lines broke the night before, so we had to rely on jugs of water the whole trip. The gas tank cap was busted, so it was hell to get the cap off. Tires had good tread, but a couple were pretty old, so they worried me. We found out the auxiliary batteries sucked, so we needed to jump-start them with a power supply every time we stopped. The main battery cable had a bad connection, so every time we started the engine, I had to stand in front and jiggle the cable while she turned the key. The slide jammed and we had to get a pry bar to get it in and out. Driving through Colorado Springs, we blew a spark plug out and had to stop for repairs. Luckily, her brother, who used to be a diesel mechanic, was traveling with us. Only took a day to fix. Regardless, we were still having a great time seeing the scenery, stopping at landmarks and national parks like Garden of the Gods, Mesa Verde, and the Grand Canyon. The furnace went out the night before we got to the Grand Canyon, and it got down to 17 degrees. I got up every hour for 10 minutes to heat the RV a little, using the propane stove, turned it off to rest, and then did it again every hour that night. We went to Roswell, Las Vegas, then on to Malibu to see the ocean and LA for a couple days. Then we headed up to Yellowstone and were blown away not only by the park itself, but the drive there from California, through Utah and Idaho, just so breathtakingly beautiful. After Yellowstone, we had to leave from the west entrance since the other roads east and south hadn't been opened yet. We drove up into Montana and for some reason, her brother insisted on getting off I-90 onto a two-lane highway through the Crow and Northern Cheyenne reservations. He was perpetually driving like an hour ahead of us because his RV was faster, and he's a bit of a reckless dude. But we didn't want to be far from him in case we ran into engine trouble again, so we didn't really have a choice but to follow him, even though I voiced much hesitation on taking a backroad route in the dead of night through a reservation. So we find ourselves taking the ramp to Route 212, had just gotten onto the Crow reservation and stopped to gas up, and immediately things just feel odd. It's past 10 p.m. and as I'm pumping gas I'm hearing children running around playing off in the dark, and cars keep driving up slowly to check us out. I get back in and Melissa is already saying to get us out of there. It's creepy as hell, so I did. We haul off down Route 212 in pursuit of her idiotic brother. Alright, he did save our bacon in Colorado Springs, so maybe idiotic is too strong. There is just nothing out there. Inky black skies, long desolate roads, sporadic groups of 4 or 5 houses every few miles. I'm acutely aware that we lost cell service as soon as we got on that highway, so I'm just praying that nothing goes wrong. I try to ignore the acute feeling that something is watching us. Her dogs start whining in their cages. The feeling of unease has continued and I really don't want to stop, but Melissa said we needed to let them out to poop or we'd be cleaning up a mess. I pull over next to a big field and she gets her oldest daughters Ariana and Isabella to leash them, and I throw open the door and let them out. As soon as they hit the grass, the 2 German shepherds sight on something out in the darkness and start going absolutely apeshit. They're barking and straining against the leash and the girls are struggling to control them. My blood pressure spikes. I look over at Melissa and she looks completely bewildered, and I reach up to the overhead compartment and pocket my handgun I brought for protection. We get the girls and the dogs back in the RV and peel off down the highway again, cognizant of the fact that we're probably going to have to clean up their shit, since they wouldn't potty outside. They're back in their cages and are continuing to whine. I drive on for about another 30 minutes, and they're still whining. Melissa says we really need to stop again to let them go outside. This is the last thing I want to do, because the whole time, I still feel like something is watching us, and I'm just running through my head all the scary stories I've read about evil spirits, skinwalkers and more. I reason with myself that I'm just scaring myself and they probably smelled a fox or coyote or something, and I really don't want to clean up dog shit from the cages on the side of a forgotten highway, only using jugs of water in the dark. We pull over again, and this time, I take my gun with me. I walk outside with the girls as they take the dogs out. I distinctly remember thinking, I don't know what good a gun will do against evil spirits, but I'm not going down without a fight. The moment their paws hit the ground, they immediately start howling and barking into the darkness again. The hair on the back of my neck stands up and I look at Ariana and she has this look of terror on her face. I say to the girls, get the dogs back in the RV, we're getting the hell out of here. But her dog Hazel is straining so hard at the dog leash, she can't get her inside. So I pick up this German shepherd in both arms and heave her through the door and run inside. As I lean out to pull the door closed, I think to myself, this is the moment where something with sharp claws grabs my arm and pulls me into the night. Thankfully, as I'm here writing this today from my bedroom, and not the belly of a skinwalker, this does not happen. The dogs go back to their cage and continue whining. I jump back in the driver's seat and gun it down the road, and Melissa leans over and says in a panicked whisper, what is going on out here? Don't you feel it? Am I crazy or does something feel really wrong? I glance at her, and remember one of the big no-nos of skinwalker lore. You don't talk about them. You don't even think of them if you can help it, because it draws their attention to you. I say, no, you're not crazy, but I can't talk about it right now. I feel it too, but just trust me, we can't talk about it right now. As I'm cresting a small hill on the highway, I look over at her and say, just trust me here, we'll talk about it later, but we can't right now. I look back ahead and there is an enormous white rabbit standing on its back legs in the middle of the road. Looking back now with the benefit of a cool head, I'm sure it was just a bit bigger than normal, but I'm telling you in that moment, it looked huge, like it was 3.5 feet tall. I swerve this 37-foot-long RV around this beast of a hare, but thankfully keep control. I put the pedal to the metal and say, "I'm sorry, I don't care if the dogs shit in their cages, I'm not stopping again." And I didn't. And thankfully, they didn't poop themselves. We made it to the town of Spearfish safely and stopped for the night, and after visiting Mount Rushmore the next day, we recounted the fear we all felt that night, and I told Melissa specifically why I didn't want to talk about it in the moment, and she said, "Yeah, I knew why. I've read all kinds of stuff about Native American legends." And I realized later with a chuckle that maybe those spirits were real, maybe they weren't. But if they were, they probably didn't appreciate me wearing a Cleveland Indians cap through their reservations. When I was a kid, my family and I went on a road trip to Wyoming to see Yellowstone National Park. It's a beautiful place, and if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. Anyways, so from our home in California, it was about a 17-hour drive in our Yukon XL. It took us several days worth of on and off driving to get there, and during the nights, we would try to find a little motel to rest at. One of the nights, due to us being behind schedule, my dad attempted to drive through the night to get us there sooner. He made it probably into the wee hours of the night before he deemed it unsafe and parked us in this little unlit rest stop in the middle of the woods in some flyover state. My brothers and I had fallen asleep in the car several hours before he'd stopped, so for at least a couple hours, we were all sleeping in the car in the dark, little parking lot surrounded by forest. Having got a couple hours of sleep and being in a pretty uncomfortable position, I woke up in the middle of the night pretty disoriented but not really scared. I looked around and saw everyone fast asleep in this pitch-black car, and naturally I felt pretty alone. I tried to fall back asleep, but it just wasn't working out, so I just sat there for a while, boredom setting in. Looking out the window to see where we were, it was pitch black, so I couldn't really see anything but darkness. Luckily, I wasn't the type to pack light and had brought a couple flashlights in my bag. Being careful not to disturb my sleeping family, I reached into the back seat, unzipped my bag, and pulled out a little plastic, yellow flashlight. It wasn't the brightest, but it was enough to see the foreground of the general surroundings. I put it up to the glass, making sure not to make any noise, and pushed the little switch so the light could turn on. I pressed my face against the glass and looked out. At first, it looked like a normal tree line with some bushes and trees, nothing unusual, I thought to myself, but as I scanned the darkness, looking for animals, buildings, etc., I noticed this dark shape standing between these two trees in the distance. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't moving, just sitting there. After watching it for a while, and seeing no real signs of movement, I just assumed it was a bush or some kind of natural occurrence. Just as I was about to turn the light off and reattempt to sleep, I saw this shadow shape turn 90 degrees and move behind a tree, disappearing from sight. This scared the hell out of me, and I immediately turned off the flashlight and threw my sweater, which I used as a blanket, over my head, shut my eyes tightly, and covered my ears. I was paralyzed with fear and too full of adrenaline to get any sleep, sat in this semi-fetal position, clutching my flashlight, for the rest of the night. I waited until the sun came up and we were back on the road before I got any sleep. I didn't tell anybody about the man I saw in the woods.